Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirbhavati bharata abhyutanam tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirbhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirbhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirbhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirbhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Yada yada hi dharmasya glanirbhavati bharata abhyutanam adharmasya tadatmanam srijamyaham. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya cha dushkritam dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge. Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chadushkritam Dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge Paritranaya sadhunam vinashaya chadushkritam Dharma samstapanartaya sambhavami yuge yuge
Kayena vacha manasendriyeva uryatmanava prakrite svabhava Tavakara Kamala Varenaka Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Keshavadrita Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagarisha Hare Jaya Jagarisha Hare Jaya Jagarisha Hare
Tavakara Kamala Varenaka Adbhuta Shringam Dalita Hiranyakashipu Tanu Narahari Rupa Jaya Jagarisha Hare Jaya Jagarisha Hare Jaya Jagarisha Hare
Jaya Sriman Narayana
Jaya Sriman Narayana
Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jaya Sriman Narayana
Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna
Jaya Shri Guru.
Jaya Shri Guru
Sanatana Dharma Jayate.
Sanatana Dharma Jayate
Dharma Rashtra Jayate.
Dharma Rashtra Jayate
Surya Vangsha Jayate.
Surya Vansha Jayate
International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate.
International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate
Om Hari Om good. Namaste, everyone, and welcome to today's live stream satsanga. And what we're going to be speaking about today is something quite special, something quite unique. I guess that's true about every live stream that we do. We do tend to speak about very unique things, many of which are not discussed anywhere today for the most part, certainly not online, certainly not on venues like YouTube or any social media. But what we're going to be talking about today is the vision of the perfected ones. That's what I decided to call this very specifically. And let me explain why, actually. We're actually going to be commenting on several verses from the Vaisheshika Sutras. And as people know, again, what we do is unique in the annals of contemporary Vedic spirituality. And that is that indeed we tend to, in addition to looking at scriptures that are quite well known, of course, I believe even last week we looked at Bhagavad Gita, Srimad Bhagavatam, some of the more well-known Upanishads. We also have this tendency in what we do in the ISDS to look at actually the totality of the scriptures, not just, our favorite 5, 6, 7 different scriptures, which is what a lot of people do. But no, we really try to take a very broad approach when it comes to the Vedic scriptures, because how can we not? I tell people this all the time, which is quite true, that when we talk about the Vedic scriptures, see, when someone says, I am Vedic, I am following Vedic, and then fill in the blank. Well, we know that actually means something. Sadly, some people don't, but we know that it actually means something. It means that you are following the Vedic scriptures. You can't just say, I am Vedic, I am following Vedic X. But the Vedic scriptures? Oh, no, I don't know anything about that. There is no such thing. And, trust me, I've actually met in person, face to face, people who pose themselves as, what would these people call themselves? I met one of these people in Houston, I met them in different places. Non-dualist teachers. And I remember meeting one who, this was at a conference, and I'm sitting with a bunch of famous actual Vedic teachers, and this person comes and encroaches himself upon us, sits with us, and he started blathering on, and I remember asking him, yes, have you read Bhagavad Gita? No, I don't actually read those scriptures. No, I get what I know from, of course, what did he say? Realization. Oh yes, realization of nothing. Realization without content. Realization without connection to anything of importance. So thus there is no realization. If a person is Vedic, that means that they are following the Vedic scriptures. And even then, that's just A. B, it means that they are truly following the totality of the Vedic scriptures. And this is, of course, what the something called the International Sanatana Dharma Society does, that no other group does. And trust me, I know all the other groups. I know them quite intimately. You'd be shocked how much I've studied religion in 51 years. And again, we actually do what is meant to be done. We don't just have our favorite scriptures that quote-unquote uphold what we say. No, we look at the entirety of the philosophical sutra literature. We look at the yoga literature. We look at not just 1, 2, 3 Upanishads, but the totality of 108 Upanishads, etc. So thus, this is what we're going to be doing today, is looking at the Vaisheshika Sutra very specifically. And what is this sutra? Well, I've explained. I'm not going to give a talk, which I've done many times, on what is the nature of even sutra literature. But let me just say that every philosophical school worth its salt historically has had at least one sutra work connected to it. So thus there is the Brahma Sutra, sometimes called Vedanta Sutra. It's actually Brahma Sutra, Brahma meaning Brahman. There is the Yoga Sutra, Narada Bhakti Sutras, Shandilya Bhakti Sutras. There was at one time the Sankhya Sutras. We don't have that anymore. It's gone, very sadly. So what we have now is what's called Sankhya Karika, which is one could say, reformulation of what was there in the Sankhya Sutra. Sadly, we don't have that anymore. We have the Nyaya Sutras, which deals with logic, and on and on and on and on. There is a very extensive sutra literature. In fact, even more than even most scholars know, actually. Even there are some scholars who think that they know, oh yes, the main sutras that I mentioned. No, there are actually many more that are extant, that exist, that are of importance, that were written by Rishis, that even a lot of scholars are not aware of, actually. Many of them are not translated. Most are, but many are not. They're still in the Sanskrita. But what we're looking at specifically today is what's called Vaisheshika Sutra. Now, what is Vaisheshika? Vaisheshika is one of the what is termed Shad-darshanas, the 6 schools of Vedic philosophy. These are all philosophical systems that are based upon the Vedic scriptures and the Vedic understanding. And there are 6 of them. Again, I argue indeed in one of my books that it's not Shad-darshana, it's Sapta-darshana. There are actually 7. The one that's not mentioned very often is what is called Vyakarana. Vyakarana is the school of grammar. It is the equivalent in modern times to the, let's say, Anglo-American school of the study of language, of linguistics. Except, of course, with Vyakarana, this was done thousands of years before any modern philosophers even existed. So in any case, Vaisheshika is one of these schools of philosophy. I'm not going to go very deeply into it because then we won't have time to even look at these verses, and I would like to have Q&A today. But Vaisheshika, academicians love to tell you who quote-unquote founded these schools. Let me just say the most important philosopher in this school was Kanada. And he was a rishi. He was, like all of these individuals, he was a very important individual. You remember when we discussed Purva Mimamsa, we mentioned Jaimini. He was the most important philosopher of that school. Well, in this case, with Vaisheshika, it's Kanada. He wrote these sutras. He wrote several other things as well, some of which are extant, some are not. But in any case, this is what he wrote and what the school deals with in the smallest of nutshells. Truthfully, this is a very complex school that we could go into very, very deeply. And it's a school that I personally began studying, 35 years ago, something like that. I've read every extant work on this school. But essentially, people call it, and this is not incorrect, this is not inaccurate, it's the physics of Vedic philosophy. In a way that is quite correct, actually. What we would term physics today is what is spoken of within this Vaisheshika Sutras, and this was the main concern of this school. Now, without going much deeper, let me just say this, because as I corrected the record when we talked about Purva Mimamsa, the school of Purva Mimamsa, now I'm going to correct the record with this school as well when it comes to the academic take on what is this school. As people know, this is what I do because it's necessary. On the one hand, I teach these truths of these Vedic works in a way that is alive. In other words, what is the actual spirituality that is there? What is the actual truth that is there? On the one hand. On the other hand, I often find myself as a person who has studied this for, again, 51 years, who has a PhD in this, having to correct the academic record. And that is, what is the academic record? They say several things about this school that are absolutely not true. And I'm not going to go through all of them because I don't want this to be a purely academic talk. I easily can and critique what is said in modern times about the school. One thing that they say is, and they try to be careful, again, I've read the literature on the Vaisheshika school. They don't say atheistic, they say non-theistic. They claim it's a non-theistic school. Now, interestingly, this is also something that I've seen not just with the academic study of Vaisheshika, but all Vedic philosophy. And it is truly, to this day, astounding to me how when I look into the background of these academicians who write about especially Vedic philosophy, religion, etc., very few of these individuals, and you can just scratch beneath the surface a little bit and you see this, they have not actually looked at what they would call the source literature. So there are people who have written about Vaisheshika who have never actually read the Vaisheshika Sutras. There are professors teaching at major universities today, I mean Ivy League universities. And they got their knowledge from their professor, who got their knowledge from their professor, who maybe read an extremely poor translation from the 19th century. And they don't actually read this literature. Well, again, to get back to the flow of what I was saying, one thing that these people say is that, oh, this is a quote-unquote non-theistic school. See, they're at least smart enough to not say atheistic because they know there's no such thing as atheism in Vedic culture. But this is one thing that they say. What we're going to see very quickly, again, by looking at the verses, is that is, I don't want to say a lie, it is an ignorant statement because these people have not actually read the Vaisheshika Sutras. Not true. It's not non-theistic. Again, it is a school that focuses on physics. I spoke about this the last time. In fact, not just the last time. I've spoken about this repeatedly when I spoke about Sankhya philosophy, when I spoke about, again, Purva Mimamsa philosophy, that all these schools have their scope of study. And that's what they do. And they stick to that. You see, if anything, what is remarkable to me, again, for individuals who have a lowly opinion of Vedic philosophy, I'm always amazed at how disciplined these philosophers are. They're experts. They are individuals they are specialists, like any scholar should be. I can't say like every scholar is today, like every scholar should be. And what does that mean? You specialize in something, and that's what you stick to. Well, this is what the so-called non-theistic schools did. Again, this is true for Purva Mimamsa, where we see that God is mentioned. This is true for Sankhya, where it's always been understood. Again, we don't have the Sankhya Sutras anymore, but we have much later literature, and God is mentioned, God is mentioned, God is mentioned. The same thing with the Vaisheshika Sutras and with this school in general, that God is mentioned here. So it's not a non-theistic school. That's the first thing that academicians say that is just not true. The second is they absolutely misunderstand the epistemology of the school. They claim that this school of Vaisheshika only accepts two epistemic mechanisms, and that is empiricism and inference. And that simply is not true. This is a Vedic school of philosophy. And let me back up and say one more thing. These are all living schools. That's a third thing that I should add, is that, of course, academicians always talk about these schools as if they're dead. They always talk about them in the was. Oh, such and such school used to believe X. No, these are all living schools, actually. These are all living schools. But getting back to epistemology, within Vaisheshika, being a Vedic school of philosophy accepted by everyone within the Vedic context as a Vedic school of philosophy, what constitutes a Vedic school of philosophy is that they accept the epistemic mechanism known as the Veda. Why is Buddhism philosophically, historically, and to this day among intelligent followers of Sanatana Dharma, why is Buddhism not considered orthodox? Not considered to be astika?
Because they don't take the Vedic epistemology seriously.
Yes. And Jainas, same question. Why?
Because they don't follow the Veda.
Yes. It's that simple. Vaisheshika is accepted as an orthodox school of philosophy. It's because they do accept the Veda. And indeed, Kannada says so within the Vaisheshika Sutras. So it's amazing. How easy is this? You have scholars for generation after generation, atheist scholars, who really couldn't care less about what they're studying. They're just too, weak to actually get a job in construction or something. I don't know, be a chef. And they will, I like to use this word because, again, I was in college for 11 years, from bachelor's all the way up to PhD and a little bit beyond. They love to drone on. That's why I use this word, because I've been in their classes for 11 years. They drone. They drone on. And they've never, thank you, I'm glad you like that. That's how they sound. And they've never actually studied the scriptures that they're droning on about. If they were to read the literature, it would contradict all these claims that they make very, very easily. So this is the advantage that we have in the ISDS. We don't need to rely on Professor so-and-so at Harvard. Oh, I've personally debated professors at Harvard, personally. I won't tell you who. Very famous Sanskritist there. Professors at Harvard, at Yale, at Princeton, at University of Chicago. Oh, indeed, at University of Wisconsin-Madison, and on and on and on. These individuals do not actually read the Vedic scriptures. They give you the appearance of having done so, but they don't. This is one of the advantages that we have, and why what the ISDS does is, and this is one of 1,000 things that make us unique, we actually read and study the Vedic scriptures, and even then, on their own terms. And even then, in order to ourselves grow spiritually. And even then, we only want to grow spiritually because it pleases Bhagavan. So this is what makes us unique. Now, all that being said, that was preface. That will be the preface for when this becomes a book in the future. With all that being said, now let us look at these verses. And indeed, if you want to follow along, please go to the description of this video, of this live stream, and the verses are there. So let's begin with Vaisheshika Sutras, and this is the very first verse of the entire work. The entire work consists of 10 chapters. And we're only going to be looking at verses from 2 of the chapters, but there are 10 altogether. So it's a pretty sizable book for sutra literature. And it begins, Atato, now then, an explanation of Dharma. The means to prosperity and liberation is Dharma. Very nice. So this is how it begins. Again, similar to all other sutra literature. We see how, why do you call, and now I'm going to sound a little bit like an academician, which I apologize for. But indeed, looking at literature, how do you create academically in your mind a genre of literature and say this is a specific genre versus this genre versus that genre, etc. It's because, of course, there have to be certain commonalities that are there. Now, interestingly, this is recognized not just by modern academicians, this is even recognized traditionally in the Vedic scriptures themselves and by truly traditional and real Vedic scholars, meaning who lived 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. They have the same criteria. So thus, for example, the Puranas. It's understood what makes a work a Purana. There are 5 elements that make a work a Purana. And I'm not going to tell you what they are. Read my book, The Vedic Way of Knowing God. I have them listed there and I comment on each of these 5 elements. And what makes an Upanishad an Upanishad? What makes a Tantra, etc., etc., etc. What makes a Veda Sanghita a Veda Sanghita? There are certain requirements by which it falls into that category. In the same way, what makes something sutra literature? Several things, actually, that I've spoken about in the past, but this is one, that they all begin in a very similar way. Now, then, now, therefore. This begins in the same way. And interestingly, it begins somewhat similarly, again, to what we saw in the Purva Mimamsa Sutra, because the Purva Mimamsa Sutra also begins in a similar way. Now then is the time to inquire into the nature of Dharma. Except when you look at the Sanskrita of that first verse in the Purva Mimamsa versus this in the Vaisheshika Sutra, what you see is that, there's an addition in the Sanskrita. There's more wording, and it is the second sentence that is here. Now then, an explanation of Dharma. So that's easy to understand. Now then, now then. Now that you're ready. Now that you're ready to truly understand what is the nature of Dharma, now comes an explanation. So it's truly an introduction. Let's look at the second sentence, because the second sentence is actually something that is fascinating. It has echoes from the Isha Upanishad, the Ishavasya Upanishad, where it explains that we are to understand the nature of vidya and avidya. We are to understand both the spiritual and the material in the Ishavasya Upanishad. Now we have something similar where in the Vaisheshika Sutras. So again, lazy academicians and the New Age types who listen to the lazy academicians and the Neo-Hindu types who listen to the lazy academicians always like to say that the Vedic scriptures are all at war with each other. They all contradict each other. They're all different people's opinions. And this work contradicts this one, etc., etc. No, what we have seen, having done live streams for 5 years, having done talks on YouTube for something like 16, 17 years, myself having taught for the last 35 years, is that there is nothing but consistency. So here with this second sentence, again, it echoes what is said in a completely different work, and that is in the Isha or Ishavasya Upanishad. And that is the means to two things, prosperity and liberation, is Dharma. Now let's talk about this. Why is it saying this? Again, every single word in the totality of the Vedic scriptures, but no, we're talking about the sutras, so this is quadruply true, because the sutras are terse. Every single word has meaning. So let's look at every single word. So the means to two things. Prosperity, what is that? So that is avidya, and liberation, vidya. So in other words, two things are discussed here, and they're discussed as being of importance. So the material, prosperity, doing well within this world, what does that mean? You know, I've said this since the beginning of my teaching Sanatana Dharma in any context, that true and balanced and sincere followers of Sanatana Dharma are to combine within themselves and their activities within this world, and harmoniously so, both their material life and their spiritual life. God is always first. The spiritual is always first. The spiritual is the foundation of the material. That's a given. But both have to be there. So what is interesting is that what Kannada is saying here is, it is through Dharma that we can have both. So fascinating. Certainly we can have liberation via Dharma, that is by following the Vedic way, by following Dharma in our own lives in such a way that we are living in accordance with God's will and everything that is implied by Dharma. Oh, we can have liberation. That's a given. Indeed, that's why most people are interested in Dharma, is because of the spiritual aspect. But we can even have prosperity. And this also is not contradictory to liberation. We can have both. Indeed, in a purely Vedic society, a well-functioning Vedic society, and we don't have any that are visible to human eyes upon the earth today. Most of them existed quite some time ago, and they're going to exist again in the immediate future. But if we were to indeed look at Vedic societies, what would we see? What Prabhupada told us. We would see societies in which, oh yes, spirituality would be at the center of all things. Where we had yogis periodically, I mean real yogis, whose feet practically don't touch the ground. We would have real yogis coming through our cities, and people would just be there in awe, just watching the yogi walk through. And many of the inhabitants would be eating off of gold plates. Together, both together. Spirituality to the utmost degree, and absolute prosperity to the utmost degree. And how are they both acquired? How are they both secured? Via Dharma. So very nice. What a nice way to begin. Let us continue now with the second verse of the Vaisheshika Sutras. Very good. So, Dharma is that from which results the accomplishment of exaltation of the Supreme Good. Very good. Here is a nice definition. We see that in the Sutra literature, again, they all tend to begin in the same way. by explaining, first of all, what is the task at hand. Then they explain either the epistemological clause or a definition of what they're examining. They'll always have these within the first 3, roughly maybe 4 verses. And one may come first, the other may come first. But in any case, what we have here is the definition of what is Dharma. So it's explained, now we will study Dharma. What is Dharma? Here we are. What is Dharma? And this is a somewhat complex sentence. It kind of had to be from the Sanskrita. But let me read this again. Dharma is that from which the results of accomplishment of exaltation of the supreme good. So very nice. So Dharma is that from which results. So what is the ultimate goal? Exaltation of the supreme good. Let me explain this in a way that makes sense. What is the ultimate goal? It's the exaltation of the supreme good. Now, this little clause alone, of course, we can go very deeply into, because one would naturally ask, well, what is the supreme good? Why should it be exalted? That would be a silly question, but we'll accept that some people will ask such questions. Well, why should a person do good? All right, good for you. In any case, what is the supreme good? What is that? To use the Latin summum bonum, Prabhupada loved to use that term. He used Latin once in a while. What is that supreme good? Well, that is understood itself via Dharma. What is the supreme good? Well, is there one supreme good? It depends on what you're speaking about. Again, in the material sense, there is a supreme good, but then going way above that, being of vastly more importance than that, is the ultimate supreme good. What is that supreme good? To fulfill God's will. That is the supreme good. And it's interesting, the reason why I say this is because everything else comes from that. It's similar to in the Srimad Bhagavatam, and again, Prabhupada gave this example 1,000 times, it seems, that when you have a massive tree, you take water and you put it at the root of that tree. You don't try to water every single leaf. Rather, you go to that root, and in that way, the entire tree is nourished. In the same way, the ultimate supreme good is to live in such a manner that we are surrendered to the will of God. And when we do that, that is the root of the tree, and naturally every other single leaf, twig, branch, etc. is taken care of. So that's what's meant by the supreme good. Exaltation of the supreme good. We're almost going to go backwards with this because it helps to make more sense if we go backwards. What is exaltation of that supreme good? It means everything that word means. It means to ourselves be excited by the fact that indeed we are doing the supreme good, we are worshiping the supreme good, we are on the path of the supreme good. It means to encourage that supreme good in all things. And indeed, let me tell you, if we were to describe the mission statement of the International Sanatana Dharma Society, this would be it. The exaltation of the supreme good. That's why the ISDS exists. And again, what does that mean? That means understanding what that supreme good is. Get on your rooftop and very happily, very nicely, shout it out to the world. And of course, not literally. But in other words, to teach this supreme good to other people as much as possible, as much as they're capable of understanding. So indeed. And then you're getting the idea. This is what is the nature of Dharma, is that it accomplishes this, the exaltation of the supreme good. So when we follow Dharma, what are we doing? Again, now you see how I began talking about this verse. What are we doing when we are sincerely following Dharma and all of the precepts of Dharma? We are surrendering to the will of God. That's what it means to follow Dharma. That is the supreme good. God is the supreme good. Now let's go on to the very next sutra. And that is the third. And here we go. This is maybe the most important one that we are looking at thus far. The epistemological validity of the Veda arises from its being the Word of God. Yes. You see?
Do we
Lazy professors, what?
Do we stop there?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, we don't need to go on. Lazy, 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 lazy Harvard professors making $150,000 a year and tenured, and they didn't read this one sentence, and they're writing books saying the opposite. This is why we can't take academicians or Wikipedia seriously. So right here, this demolishes, again, those first two clauses that I said that academicians tend to say about the school of Vaisheshika, which are not true. So first of all, it explains that indeed the Veda is an epistemic mechanism, that it is a way of validly knowing the truth. It's called a pramana. A pramana in the Sanskrita means a valid epistemic mechanism. Not just any epistemic mechanism, but by default, by definition, a valid one. So thus, the school of Vaisheshika accepts Shabda Pramana as a way of knowing God. So again, the academicians are wrong. They said there are only two. No, there are three. And historically, they would not. These followers of Vaisheshika would not be accepted as Vedic if they did not accept all three. And certainly the most important being Shabda Pramana. That is, that you accept that the Vedic scriptures are a mechanism by which we can cognize truth. That is pramana. That is what the term pramana means. To translate it, I literally just did a on-the-spot translation in my mind, and that's the technical translation of what is the word pramana. So the epistemological validity of the Veda, right here, again, Kannada is explaining that this is a pramana, a valid way of knowing, and now this is more important. This second clause is crucial. Why? That's amazing what he says. Again, keep in mind that according to modern academicians, this is a non-theistic school. Why is the Veda valid as a means of knowing? Because it arises from its being the Word of God, which is literally what Shabda means. The word Shabda. The word Shabda means word. The word Shabda, interestingly, and this is the beauty actually, but also the complexity of Sanskrita, is that you need to understand the words, whether they are nouns, whether they are verbs, whatever they are. You need to understand them fully and within context. So the word Shabda simply means word, and it's used in that sense sometimes in some of the literature. It will just mean, oh, I heard a word somewhere. Oh, someone said my name. Oh, I heard a Shabda, I heard a word. But then in accordance with the context, it's also understood that Shabda means an epistemic mechanism by which we know God. And what is that? Divine sound vibration. And divine sound vibration is aparusheya. It is non-man-made. Rather, it is eternal because it is coexistent, co-absolute with that which is the absolute, God. So with all that understanding, indeed, Kannada had that understanding, and he stated it perfectly. The epistemological validity of the Veda, so thus the Veda is a pramana. Why? Because it arises from its being the Word of God. Very good. So there, Harvard, take that. And now we get to this interesting verse that I want to speak about, and this is from much later in the Vaisheshika Sutras, and I will first read this, and then we will comment on this. The teachings of the Rishis and the vision of the perfected ones, or Siddhas, arise from Dharma. Nice. Now we get to what is the actual title of our talk today. We could say, in a way, that everything else has been prefaced up to this. And I believe this is correct. It's chapter 10, not chapter 15. So I believe that's a misprint that's there, because there are only 10 chapters in the Vaisheshika Sutras. But the teachings of the Rishis and the vision of the perfected ones, Siddhas, arise from Dharma. Now, the Rishis, we know who the Rishis are. I've spoken about these individuals endlessly. Indeed, I have written an entire work called The Vedic Way of Knowing God. where I talk about not just the Rishis, not just their stories. I talk about quite literally what is what I call Rishi phenomenon. In other words, I talk about precisely what are the very mechanics of revelatory experience that occurs within the Rishi himself, such that he can reveal a Vedic scripture. No human being on the planet has ever done this. And I do this in my book, The Vedic Way of Knowing God. So in other words, we know what Rishis are. But what I really want to talk about is something that is rarely spoken about today, and that is these perfected ones. This is what the term Siddha actually means. And in this case, it's in the plural, perfected ones. Now, when it comes to Siddhas, some people who know a little something about Vedic spirituality in one context or another may have heard this word, may have a little bit of an understanding of what it means, but most likely might have a somewhat confused understanding. So I don't have my sword with me right now, it's in the other room, but I am going to take that sword and cut away that confusion for everyone. There are three very distinct phenomena within modernity that arise when people hear this word Siddha. And let me almost work backwards from this, actually. Number one, there are a group of Shaiva sages, all of whom lived, I believe, in Tamil Nadu, and they are called the Siddhas, with an R on the end. These are very specific individuals who lived within not just history. They lived roughly 1,000, 1,200 years ago, something like that. And they are Shaivas, very specifically, and they are grouped together as the Siddhas. And again, they are a somewhat more sectarian expression of Sanatana Dharma. Again, they themselves are all Shaivas. Their teachings, while their teachings are quite nice, generally, they're accepted mostly by Shaivas. That's one group of individuals who are termed Siddhas. It's a grouping of individuals. There is another grouping of individuals who some of them were contemporaneous with that first group. Some of them lived a little bit earlier, etc. These individuals lived primarily in North India, a few in Bengal, a few in Nepal. I believe several of them actually lived in Tibet as well. That was a radically different phenomenon. Some people call these the Mahasiddhas. And it's a tradition that's there. It's a non-Vedic tradition. Let me make that clear. The first one that I mentioned, that first grouping of individuals, the Siddhas, that is Vedic. Again, they're Shaivas. This secondary group that are sometimes called the Mahasiddhas, that existed primarily, again, in northern India, Tibet, Nepal, etc. This is a non-Vedic grouping of individuals. Why is this the case? This is the case because they were radical universalists, number one. Number two, many of these people were degenerates. And I'm not going to mention their names as to not offend people. These are individuals who, again, existed 1,200 years ago, 1,500 years ago. There's a whole grouping of them, actually. And, you can very easily do some research, find their names, etc. But when you look at the life story of these people, some of them were okay. Some of them were kind of general yogis. Some of them were radical left-hand path tantric degenerates, etc. You look at their life and you wouldn't want to really be near one of these people, unless you're a degenerate. Well, that's different. But if you're a good person, if you're a normal person, you really wouldn't want to associate with these people because of their practices. And the other thing is that they were radical universalists. In other words, for these individuals, the idea of lineage meant nothing, the idea of scripture meant nothing, the idea of parampara meant nothing. So many of these people were kind of quasi-mixtures of Vajrayana Buddhists with the very worst elements of, I can't even call it Sanatana Dharma because it wasn't, the very worst elements of maybe Hinduism brought together. Those were the so-called Mahasiddhas. Kannada is not talking about either of those groups, either the first or the second that I've mentioned. Rather, what he is speaking about is something very unique, and that is what is actually meant by the Siddhas, the perfected ones in the Vedic scriptures. In the Vedic scriptures, which radically pre-existed both of those groups that I just mentioned by thousands of years, The Vedic scriptures, when they mention the word siddha or siddhas, obviously are not referring to those two groups because they're later. What the Vedic scriptures is referring to very specifically are the denizens of a planet. How is that? Now let me talk about what the actual siddhas are. Again, for individuals who they think they've heard this word, they think they know what it means. Oh, but I practice siddha yoga. No, you don't know what the siddhas are. Let me explain precisely what the Vedic scriptures are speaking of when they use this term siddha. There is an actual realm within our cosmos called Siddha-loka. The Jainas even acknowledge this. They call it Siddha-shila. But there is a realm. There is what we would call a loka, a planet. And it is a very special planet. It is extremely, if we were to understand it hierarchically, but also geographically even, because geography does correspond with hierarchy in Vedic cosmology, interestingly. It is a realm that exists extremely highly situated, to the point where, let me explain how highly situated, even many of the gods are barred entry to this place. Even many of the gods are barred entry. And who exists in this place? The actual siddhas that are being spoken of. Not just sectarian individuals who represent Shaivism, as wonderful as they were. Certainly not degenerates who tried to bring mixes of Vajrayana Buddhism with the worst elements of Hinduism. That's not what we're talking about. The Vedic scriptures, when the term siddha is mentioned, what is meant are the denizens, the residents of this quite literally planetary system known as Siddha-loka. This is a planet. It is a realm that is inhabited by yogis and rishis and extremely advanced sages, some of who have already achieved liberation, others of who are 1 inch away from liberation. But these are yogis so advanced to the point where they don't come to this realm. They don't need to. You will never meet a siddha unless you go there, to their realm. Can you imagine this? There is indeed an entire planet of beings who, again, they either are liberated or they are 1 inch away from liberation. These are not just real yogis, but the most advanced of yogis in our universe. That's Siddha-loka. This is a realm in which their lifespan, as you can imagine, is extremely long. And when I say extremely long, I mean for some of these beings, if they choose to, they can live for multiple millions of years. These are individuals who have already perfected yoga. These are individuals who live in a planetary system where even the gravity is different from what it is here. These are individuals who, when they meditate, they don't touch the ground. At the very least, they are above the ground by several feet. Indeed, they would consider that if they had to actually sit on the ground and meditate, that would be undignified for them. That's how advanced these beings are. And Siddha-loka is a realm not only in which these very advanced yogis live there, but it's also a hub for spirituality within our cosmos, meaning that other beings will come and visit. Again, even many of the gods. If you're just a mere deva, no, you're barred entry. You literally can't come within the atmosphere. You'll hit an invisible wall, and you won't even be able to enter that planet. But other beings, if they are spiritual and also yogis, but very high beings, they can come. Someone like a Narada Muni can come there. The higher gods, the celestial gods, can come there. A Narayana Rishi can go there. Very advanced beings. And these, let me put it this way without going too deeply, which I can actually talk about Siddha-loka and these perfected ones, these siddhas, for a very long time. Let me just say this. The very fact that this place exists and that you have quite literally a planet of individuals doing tapasya, quite literally a planet of individuals doing yoga, a planet of individuals who, when they go into meditation, they'll be in meditation for 1,000 years. Not, oh, my mind is starting to wander after 5 minutes. No, they'll sit in meditation for 1,000 years. The very fact that this realm exists helps to keep our cosmos in a state of order, and helps to keep spirituality, generally speaking, alive. So indeed, it's truly an amazing place, and there are yogis there, there are yoginis there, and this also is what is fascinating about Siddha-loka. And again, I said I wasn't going to go very deeply, but we'll see what happens. So we'll see if I end up going very deeply. This is what is one of the many things that's astounding, is that you have yogis of every description. So in other words, you will have what ISKCON people will call Mayavadis, what are really Brahmavadis. You will have individuals who, their goal really is to merge, with Brahman. You'll have Vaishnavas there. You'll have yogis, again, of every description. But they're all sattvika yogis, that is for sure. In other words, if you were to have the ability, the good fortune of ever entering Siddha-loka, trust me, at no point would you ever encounter one left-hand path tamasic yogi there. Most likely, if they tried to enter that atmosphere, they would just burn to ashes trying to enter. Every yogi there is a true yogi. They're a good yogi. They're individuals who are virtuous, who are good, whose goal, again, in one way or another, is to be with God. They're not all devotees, interestingly. They're not all Vaishnavas. You see, one would expect that, me being a Vaishnava, of course, I would say something sectarian. They must be Vaishnava. No, actually, many are. But again, they follow many different paths, but all of which are sattvika, all of which are good. But some of these people are Brahmavadis. They want to, quote unquote, merge with God. Now, this is the important thing. What is one of many ways that we know that indeed these beings, these siddhas, are indeed beings who are good, beings who are virtuous? Let's read this again. The teachings of the Rishis and the vision of the perfected ones arise from Dharma. So in other words, again, the teachings of the Rishis, this is what's being explained. How does a Rishi become a Rishi? How does a Siddha become a Siddha? Because they follow Dharma. That is, they follow the path of virtue, of righteousness, of goodness, etc. They follow the natural way, the way of the natural order. And it's as a result of this that a Rishi becomes a Rishi and thus has the ability to reveal truth. And more, the vision of the perfected ones. Why is it described differently? Why not just say the teachings of the Rishis and the perfected ones? No, it's not, is it? It is the Rishis who actually reveal the Vedas. What do these Siddhas do? They do something a little bit different. Can they reveal a Veda? Oh, sure, some of them are Rishis. Again, I mentioned a few. They can, but in actuality, the Siddhas serve a very functional role within our cosmos, a very functional, a very special role within our cosmos. And that is, again, keep in mind what I was saying, they are situated at almost the very top of our cosmos. They are situated in a place that is a spiritual hub for the entire universe. You could say their realm, Siddha-loka, is the center of spirituality in our very universe. That being the case, what they are known for especially is their vision of reality. What does that mean? That means quite literally in that sense, they know what's going to happen. They have trikalagya, they have information, knowledge, insight, vision of past, present, future. But more, their role is to know what is reality, what should happen, what will happen, but more, once in a while, also to make it happen. These are the Siddhas. These are the Siddhas. These are the Siddhas who are being spoken of. And how does one become a Siddha? You practice Dharma perfectly. In the same way, how does one become a Rishi? you practice Dharma perfectly. So thus, we end here. These 4 verses from Vaisheshika Sutras. How amazing, how fascinating, how truly astounding that we can look at 4 sutras, 4 very terse aphorisms from what seems like such an esoteric work. You know, who's heard of this? Very few people. The Vaisheshika what? The what sutras? I've heard of the Yoga Sutras, but who's heard of the Vaisheshika Sutras? And again, this is why people who claim to be very serious Vedic practitioners, but they only stick to a few books. Oh, yes, I've read Bhagavad Gita 10 times. Oh, that's nice. Have you read anything else? This is why it's crucial that, again, you can't just read Bhagavad Gita. You can't just read Isha Upanishad. You cannot just read the Srimad Bhagavatam, even. You have to lose your fear of thinking that, if I look at the totality of the Vedic scriptures, maybe I'll find something that contradicts my worldview. No, what you're going to find is not only confirmation, not only is it the case that every scripture confirms the other Vedic scriptures. When I say scripture, let me make this very clear. Every Vedic scripture confirms every other Vedic scripture, and vice versa. Not only is that the case, but you also, in looking deeply at these lesser known scriptures, will find gems. People use that word all the time. No, truly, you're going to find diamonds this big, figuratively speaking, as far as wisdom, as far as true knowledge. People like to today use the word gnosis all the time. True knowledge, vidya. Gnosis comes actually Sanskritically from jnana. So you want actual gnosis? Forget about the gnosis. Go to the jnana. That's the source of the gnosis. In the same way, you want to truly find, figuratively speaking, massive gems of wisdom, of knowledge, of information, of tools that will help you to go beyond your mind, beyond your intellect, and to begin to actually experience God. Study these Vedic scriptures and study them all. Study all the sutra literature, what's available to you in whatever your language is. Again, not all of it has been translated. Same thing with the Tantras. Not all of it has been translated. Let's see, the Pancharatra literature, not all of it has been translated. So unless you want to take 10 years to study Sanskrit, find what you can, translate it in your language. Read it. And if you ever have this good fortune, study it with a true guru who has read it and who understands it perfectly. And what you will find is that, again, the wealth of spirituality that you will have will be unparalleled. There's nothing in modern times. See, always keep in mind, when I say modern times, I'm talking about the last 3,000 years. To me, the last 3,000 years is modern. There's nothing in modern times that compares to the Vedic scriptures. Nothing. All right. With that, let's pause here. Let me ask our local devotees here. Are we good with time? How are you doing? Are you comfortable still? Okay, very good. You need to get a snack, some water, tea, anything? You're good? All right. In that case, let's take some questions from people. I want to see now if there are any questions from anyone. Yes, please.
Regarding the Vaishnava Siddhas, would it be the correct understanding that the ones that are liberated, specifically, they're choosing to remain in Siddha-loka rather than going to Vaikuntha in order to be of benefit to us?
That is exactly the understanding. Yeah, that is exactly the understanding. So again, I mentioned there are many different kinds of Siddhas. They're not all Vaishnavas. And of the ones who are Vaishnavas, even then there are 2 categories. The categories I mentioned, there are some people in Siddha-loka who really they are liberated. They are called Jivan Mukta. They are still within the material world, but really they're liberated. There's no material tinge left to them. Their ego is gone. But then there are those who they're very close to that. So you're asking about the first category, that is those who are liberated. Yes, the reason why they haven't moved on is because for one reason or another they have either chosen to or they've been ordered to stay here. So they're still within the material world. Yeah, and not just on Siddha-loka, but we know, of course, there are similar beings all throughout the cosmos. There are individuals who are great devotees. There are throughout the cosmos, not just on this planet, not just on Siddha-loka, who they are here very purposefully, even though they don't need to be. Again, even on this planet, there are a number of immortals. Hanuman is one of them, Vyasa is another, Naranarayana Rishi are two more. And they are choosing to be here for our benefit. Such is the nature of their compassion. Good question. Very good. Very good. I have to go up a little bit now because so many questions have poured in. I'm going to the top. Nice. Here is a very good question, actually. And again, I won't mention people's names. It's not of importance. Though let me say, you know who you are, and I like your name, actually. But this is the question. Namaste, Acharyaji. In knowing that God is perfect, does God become imperfect and or limited when he enters the human form as an avatar? Krishna, Rama, etc. That is a very good question, and let me give you the definitive answer. And let me explain. When I say the definitive answer, what I mean by that is if you approach someone else, whatever they call themselves a Swami, a Guru, a whatever, I'm a great Maharishi. They can be a Westerner, they can be someone from India, they can have long hair down to their knees, etc. If they say something different from what I am about to tell you, they're either lying or more likely they're not intelligent. They just don't know the answer. And this is the answer. God is never limited. Period. And this includes the avatars. The Vedic scriptures, including the Srimad Bhagavatam, but all the Puranas, the Mahabharata, the Ramayana, make this very, very clear. Indeed, the Bhagavad Gita. There are many verses within the Bhagavad Gita in which Krishna explains this very clearly. Indeed, he tells Arjuna in one area of the Bhagavad Gita that, oh yes, speaking about something specifically, all these things you don't remember, but I do. So indeed, when God comes as an avatar, he is still fully God. He comes in a form that necessarily, in order to perform his mission, seems to uninformed eyes to be something that is limited. But for those who have the ability to truly see that avatar, which, again, Arjuna is an example, where he actually saw the Vishvarupa, that is, who Krishna actually was, it is understood that, no, there is never limitation upon God. God remains perfect. God remains God in every single way. So I hope that answers the question. Again, this is what all the Vedic scriptures say. This is what Prabhupada said. This was what all the great acharyas, Ramanuja Acharya, Nimbarka, Madhva Acharya. This is what all the acharyas said. This is the standard understanding. If on YouTube, here, there, anywhere, in person, you meet someone who they claim they're a Vedic teacher and they say otherwise, they are not a Vedic teacher. They haven't studied. They haven't even read the Vedic scriptures in that case. So that's the answer. So let me see what other questions there are. All right. Here's an interesting question, actually. And I have actually not just answered this question. I've actually purposefully spoken about this, not in a live stream. I don't think I was ever at least as far as video. I don't believe I was recorded, but more in private conversations I've spoken about this. And your question is, Namaste Sri Acharyaji, should we dharmis draw the line with extreme cases like in that of BAPS, Bocha Sanwasi Aksha Purushottama Sangsta? For those who don't know, that's what BAPS stands for. You see, when I say I know every other Vedic group in existence, I'm not joking. That's quite literally what it stands for. Where they claim a human is God. Should we bring them back into Vaishnavism or just leave them be? Let me tell you, as you can tell, I know this group quite well. These are the followers of Swami Narayan. And Swami Narayan was an individual who, I forget where he originated, but I know, he certainly ended up in Gujarat. I forget if he was born in Gujarat. But in any case, he was someone who started off as a very young yogi, very sincere. He traveled all the way to the Himalayas, many places, searching for a true guru. And to make a long story short, indeed, he settled in Gujarat and he began teaching. He was a Vaishnava. Indeed, not only was he a Vaishnava in the Ramanuja Sampradaya, in our Sampradaya. He was a Sri Vaishnava. His philosophy was Vishishta Advaita, as is that of the ISDS. However, again, he also had some very unique spins on his teaching. And I forget if it was during his life or more likely afterwards, sadly, individuals, his devotees, began to worship him as a Purna Avatara, as God himself. And that is the case to this day. There are several organizations that follow Swami Narayana. BAPS, BAPS is only one of them. It's maybe the biggest. It's certainly the most well known. When you see these massive Swami Narayana temples in London, in Chicago, all these places, that's BAPS for the most part. But again, they're not the only ones. But indeed, they all worship Swami Narayana, this great sage, as a Purna Avatar, as God himself. Now, let me say a few things about this. First of all, with all due respect, indeed, Swami Narayana is not a Purna Avatar. He's not someone who is quite literally an incarnation of Narayana in the same way that Krishna is, that Rama is, Narasingha is, Trivikrama, Matsya, etc., etc., etc. He is not. He is not. He is not. Rather, what we have seen historically and almost academically is that, especially beginning, in what, again, the academicians like to call the medieval era of Hinduism, of quote-unquote India, we see many groups arise where indeed they have a great guru, and rather than doing what traditionally is done, and that is that the guru passes away, and you just revere the guru who's passed away as a guru, as a previous guru, you have many groups that will start worshiping that guru as God. What's another example of this that we know? ISKCON. Yes, ISKCON. And not just ISKCON, many contemporary Gaudiya Vaishnavas worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They did the same thing. This was a very great sage. He was an Avesha avatar. And they started to say, no, he is Krishna. No, he is Krishna. No, of course, there's no evidence of that. There are zero verses in the Vedic scriptures that say that. The same thing with Swami Narayana. After he passed away, they started to say, no, he's God, he's God, he's God. No evidence of this whatsoever. At the same time, we need to say this, that he was an Avesha avatar. He was another one. And I have stated this, not very often, because the question doesn't come up as often as with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But whenever the question comes up, I explain that, he was indeed an Avesha avatar. And just to explain again, to give that definition, a Purna avatar is a direct descent of God. God himself comes to the earth. An Avesha avatar is a human being, an Atman, not Paramatman, but a regular Atman, who meets certain criteria, and the criteria are there. You can know who is an Avesha avatar. There's no mystery. It's not a matter of, I just like this person, so I'm going to call him an Avesha avatar. No. The person has to meet certain criteria. And what an Avesha avatar is a human being, just like the rest of us, But he went through, well, first of all, he has a very special mission to, as I like to state it, save the world. And more, he meets those criteria throughout his life such that he becomes a person who is equipped to save the world, in that he is directly empowered by God. God is there with him. God is with every Atman. We know that. Don't play Asura's advocate. Oh, but isn't God with all of us? Yeah, we know, of course. But no. An Avesha avatar is especially empowered with God's presence in such a manner that there is nothing but purity there. It is a liberated being. Ego is gone. All that exists is the empowerment of God and the will to serve God's mission to save the world. That's an Avesha avatar. The Buddha was such an Avesha avatar. Again, I mentioned Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was such an Avesha avatar. Prabhupada, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada, Abhaya Charanaravinda Bhaktivedanta Swami Maharaja, was another Avesha avatar, as was Swami Narayana. So he was a human. He was not God, he was a human, but he was so directly empowered by God. Oh, I forgot to mention Jesus also, Avesha avatar. Swami Narayana was so empowered by God such that when you looked upon him, you would also see God with him. You would see God's empowerment there. But he wasn't God. So when you ask this question, I know it's a well-meaning it's a well-meaning question, and you mean well by saying this, but no, they are Vaishnavas. Technically, they are Vaishnavas. They worship Narayana. They've made the mistake that indeed, in their over-enthusiasm for their guru, they say that their guru is God. That's a mistake. Again, Gaudiyas do the same thing. Are we to say Gaudiyas are not Vaishnavas? Not even so much ISKCON. I mean the real Gaudiyas in India, the ones I studied with and I lived with, who never came to the West. The disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. People don't know this about me. When I was in India in 1985, 1986, I think I met probably a total of 20 living disciples of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati. So are we to say these people are not Vaishnavas? Of course, they're Vaishnavas. The Swaminarayana people of BAPS or whatever organization, they're Vaishnavas, but they're off on this one thing. So indeed, we embrace them as Vaishnavas, but if we were to have a talk with them, we would put our arm around them and say, Swami Narayana was wonderful. He did wonderful things in Gujarat, but he was not God. I hope that answers the question as thoroughly as is necessary. I think I answered that pretty thoroughly. Good. Let me answer this because this can be this is an important question, but it also can be answered pretty quickly, actually. And it is, my humble respects to you, Sri Acharyaji. Are these planets, and I assume you're talking about Siddha-loka, what we've been talking about, are these planets actual planets like Earth or something else? And are there planets with people and are there planets with people other than Earth in this universe? Okay, I believe I understand what you're asking with the second question. These are two separate questions, and I'll answer them both. So first, the first question. Are the Siddha-loka planets actual planets like Earth? No. No. We call them lokas. But for that matter, again, loka is a general term. It means several things. Again, Sanskritically, many of these words have multiple meanings, and you know the actual meaning in accordance with the context and other ways as well. Not just the context, but I don't want to go too deeply into Vyakarana, Vedic grammar. But when it comes to this term loka, loka means quite literally planet. It also means region. It also means realm, a place, a distinct realm. So this is how we are to understand that when we speak about Siddha-loka, it's different from Bhumi-loka. Bhumi-loka means quite literally this spherical place known as the earth. And indeed, the earth is round. The earth is not flat. For those out there who really need this, let me say this 3 times. The earth is not flat. The earth is not flat. The earth is not flat. So indeed, when we hear of, for example, Bhumi-loka, Oh, it means quite literally this planet. When we hear about this term Siddha-loka, on the other hand, it doesn't mean quite literally a planet, it's a realm. And I don't want to go deeper into that. Trust me, I can. And half of it you would understand. But that's the first question. The second is, are there planets with people? I assume you mean humans. Other than Earth in this universe? Yes, there are multiple, actually. There are multiple planets with Manusya. This is explained in the Vedic scriptures. This has been experienced by people in the 20th century. I don't know about the 21st. I must assume it's continued. But in any case, yes, there are multiple planets that are similar to Earth in that they're inhabited by humans. Manusya, strictly speaking, the category of human. However, on some of these planets, these humans are similar to us as far as advancement. And of course, what I mean by advancement is not iPhones. What I mean by advancement is how advanced they are as beings. There are some planets in which they're very similar to what we would encounter here. There are some planets in which they're not very advanced at all. There are some planets in which they are so advanced to the point where some people mistakenly would think that they're gods. And indeed, that mistake has been made. Where there are some planets of humans, of Manusya, where indeed they live for much longer than humans do upon the earth. Physically, health-wise, they're much healthier than the typical human, and especially of today. And what does that mean? That means they're taller. That means that they are quite literally healthier. They have luster, almost light coming from them. They are wiser. They are more peaceful. They are more spiritual, etc., etc. Their technology is indeed better than anything that we have on Earth. Indeed, they can visit us. We can't visit them. It's always easier to go from top down, not the other way around. To go from a higher plane to a lower plane is easy. To do the opposite is very difficult, almost impossible. So indeed, there are Manusya, human beings, living on multiple planets. This is not the only planet with specifically the designation of human as the predominant species of that planet. So. And just give me a few moments. We won't go much longer because we are definitely over time, but I'm happy that I'm answering probably more questions than I usually do. Again, usually we really run out of time, but I've decided to just go a little bit over time. Oh, good. Another question that is nice, a nice question, but it also can be answered easily. Namaste, Sri Acharyaji. I really like the talk. Thank you so much. I appreciate you saying that. I want to ask if the divine right of kings exists in Sanatana Dharma. Let me not even answer that. I'm going to give a little test for my students here, who are here. And nice and loud. What do you think?
Yes.
Yes. Just intuitively, of course. Yeah. You've read the Vedic scriptures, so this is why they can answer with such confidence and authority. Yes, this is spoken about throughout the Vedic scriptures. Actually, there is indeed a divine right of kings. What is meant by that? I'm tempted. But I'm not going to give a long talk on what is even meant by that in both the Western tradition, even the Middle Eastern tradition, and then what to speak of the Vedic tradition. I'm not going to do that. Let me just say, very generally, that indeed, if an individual is a true king, it is understood that he is ruling in accordance with the will and the empowerment directly of God and the gods. And it is because he is following Dharma. So that being the case, yes, a true king is someone who has the divine right to rule. He has the mandate, as they would say in China, he has the mandate of heaven, not today's China, which is, real China, meaning thousands of years ago. Not the place where they, again, make iPhones. No, the real China of thousands of years ago, they would call this the mandate of heaven. We call it the divine mandate of God, etc. A true king has the mandate of God. That is understood Vedically indeed. Let me say this. Any of these ideas that you find in the history of Europe existed Vedically first. When you find these ideas with medieval Christian kings Holy Roman Empire, if you find it, when you find these ideas, even going back to the Roman Empire, so many different kingdoms that existed in truly pre-Christian times, those were all pale reflections of the Vedic understanding. We have thousands of verses that explain just this alone throughout the Vedic scriptures. Not just a little mention here or there. We have the entire science of divine rule. Indeed, I wrote a book about this called the Dharma Manifesto. But good question. Thank you for asking that. Oh, I'm sorry. Give me one moment. The screen shifted here, so I have to go back to where I was. So just give me a moment, please. At this point, what am I going to say? Because I see there are lots of questions. I'm not going to be able to answer them all with this session, unfortunately. So I'm going to look for specific questions that I really do believe I cannot but answer them. So if I'm skipping your question, I'm no longer going in sequence. Again, I'm kind of looking for questions that really need to be answered. Please don't take offense. It's not that you asked a bad question. It's just time. We've gone almost 2 hours now. Good. This I'll answer quickly, but it's a good question. This is a follow-up because this is someone who they've asked me questions along the way about how they can increase their Shakti, their inner power. So this is a nice follow-up question. Shakti training is good, very good. Thank you for that update. But what does one do if they are only peaceful during meditation and immediately lose that focus once meditation is over? That is a very nice practical question. And indeed, again, this happens to many, many people. Let me say that it's not 100% possible to answer this question perfectly for you because it's such a subjective question. I don't know your life. I don't know what kind of job you have, where you live, etc. So it will be a little bit different for different people in accordance with these things. But let me just say several things about this somewhat generally. First of all, keep meditating and work on the quality of your meditation, not just the quantity. You see, some other person would say, well, meditate more. No, that's not necessarily the answer at all. Meditate better, meditate deeper, meditate in such a way that you are truly fulfilling the very purpose of meditation itself, which is, again, what?
Please God.
To please God. In other words, yes, focus on the quality of your devotion as you meditate. You see, this is how we increase quality of anything that we're doing spiritually. We increase our devotion. That's what it means to increase quality. Because why? Oh, we're getting at the very heart of our issue as living beings. What is the issue that we experience as living beings? Why are we here? Why do we suffer? Why do we have happiness? Why do we have confusion? Why do we have any of these things? Very simply, we are in illusion due to ego, and we wish to reverse that. We wish to rid ourselves of ego, and how do we do that? Via bhakti, via devotion, which is the very opposite of false ego. That's simple. That being the case, if you want to increase the quality of your sadhana in any way, increase the devotion. So that's the first thing that I would say. The other thing is this. Truly, as words of encouragement, whatever you do, don't give up, because trust me, meditation takes time. Individuals who think that, I'll try meditation for a few weeks and I'll see what happens. No. That would be like you have a delicious soup in front of you and you don't even want to put a spoon into it and taste it. You want to taste one atom of the soup. You're not going to taste the soup. In the same way, this is true for meditation. I've meditated for a few weeks. Why aren't I levitating? No. You've tasted one atom of meditation. It takes time, it takes effort, and again, it takes increasing that quality. So don't give up. Don't give up. Please continue. Continue every day. That's the second thing. The third thing I'll say, and the last thing, is this. That you also need to look at your exterior world. This is something that is of great importance. So in other words, it's good that you're sitting down and meditating each day. But what is the rest of your life like? And I mean literally everything. Where you live, what kind of job you have, who you are surrounded by, who are your friends, etc., etc., even who's your family. You need to ask yourself about all these things. And that is that, all right, when I sit down and I'm doing my meditation and I'm very peaceful, that is wonderful. But now when I open my eyes and I stand up, what sort of environment am I in? And again, I don't know you. I don't know what kind of environment you're in. You could be living in a forest hermitage for all I know, or you could be in the center of Mumbai. I don't know. But the point is, wherever you find yourself, do everything that you can to spiritualize your environment. And this may be the last question, sadly, that I'll take. We'll see, just due to time, because I do want to go into this a little bit, because this is good advice for everyone. You want to spiritualize your environment. What does that mean? That means in your home, begin with what's immediate. In your home, surround yourself with transcendental things. If you come here to our temple, you'll see in every single room we have images that are sacred. We have Krishna, we have Rama, we have Paramatman, we have gods and goddesses, we have Saraswati, we have all sorts of images on all the walls. We have murtis everywhere. Do the same thing in your home where you're living. Do you live in an office? Do you have a desk? Do the same thing. Have a little image of Krishna with you on your desk. Don't worry about what your coworkers are going to say. If you're worried about what your coworkers are going to say in your desire to have an image of Krishna there, then you have other priorities then that you need to worry about. If you're ashamed of Krishna, then you have more problems, actually, than you know. No, don't worry about what anyone says. Have a beautiful little image. Doesn't have to be massive. It can be a little, either murti, it can be a picture in a frame. But have something sacred that is there, so that when you're working, and you have to just take a little break, and you breathe. Even if it's for 5 seconds, you look at that image. And you bring yourself back to that meditative state that you were experiencing when you were meditating. The last thing that I'm going to say is this. Choose your friends and your associates wisely. Do the Vedic scriptures not talk about this? In almost every scripture. The Bhagavad Gita does, Srimad Bhagavatam does. So many scriptures mention this. You become like that with whom you associate. So in other words, if you have bad people in your life, either tamasic or non-devotees, atheists, etc., and if you have a choice, start to veer away from them and instead make friends with other individuals who also are spiritual. You see, in every way, surround yourself with the spiritual. This being the case, even when you're not literally sitting there meditating, but you're doing other things, you will still be able to retain that meditational awareness with you at all times. So this is advice not just for you, but again, this is what everyone should do if we want to grow spiritually. Let me just look quickly, and this is why I always do. I said we're going to end here by... My students are laughing here because they know that's the case. But then I look, is there one more question that I can answer? Let me just look very quickly. Let me see if I understand this one specific question. And again, this may be the last one I'll take. We'll see. But let me just read this, see if I understand it fully. Okay. Yes, I believe I understand. I believe I understand this actually. Yes. Let me answer this, and it is actually a good question. It's a very good question. Namaste, Sri Acharyaji. Thank you for this talk. Thank you very much again for saying that. In the process of waking up, so to speak, can a change in mood irritability present itself after an experience, during or after meditation? I'm kind of throwing some words in there. Hopefully I understood the question correctly. If not, I apologize. But if that's what you're asking, and when you say in the process of waking up, so to speak, I assume you mean, once the meditation is over and now you're coming back to normative awareness, normative consciousness. So you're asking, can a change in one's mood irritability occur or present itself after an experience during or after meditation? That usually is not the case. Let me put it this way. That should not be the case, ultimately. However, that such things could happen in the beginning of one's meditation life. And again, what I mean by that, when one is a new meditator, I'm talking about the first 2 or 3 years. Some people think, oh, this one's a new meditator. He's been meditating for 2 weeks. In my mind, a new meditator means 3 or 4 years. So again, in the very beginning, when an individual is beginning to meditate, all sorts of things will occur. Interesting things. Some things of which they almost seem contradictory to what you're trying to accomplish with meditation. So indeed, strange things can happen. Sometimes a person will be in meditation, and what to speak of, when they stop the meditation, sometimes even during the meditation, strange things will begin to happen in the mind, in the emotions. And when I say strange, I just mean, again, unexpected. And the example that's given is that when a person is meditating, it's similar to beginning to clean a room. Let's say you have a room in a house, and I don't want to say everyone has a room like this because you shouldn't, but a lot of people do. Let's say there is a room of the house that you have, and nothing in there has been cleaned for 10 years. It's the room where you throw all your stuff, to store and everything. And for years, dirt and dust has accumulated. Well, now you say, all right, this is it. Finally, I'm going to get in there and clean this room. You go in there and you've got your gloves on and your mask and everything, and you have all your cleaning materials, dusters of every kind, brooms. You go in there and you start the process of cleaning, even in a very nice systematic way. What's the first thing that happens? First thing that happens is that you're now surrounded by a cloud of dirt and dust. And for the first, half an hour, the room seems almost worse. Whereas things at least seem somewhat orderly, now everything's kind of scattered. And again, there's dirt and dust everywhere. Well, that is the process, the beginning process of cleaning. And we know that, don't worry about that. You keep going, and eventually the dust settles, and you clean that dust away. And now things that you put out of place, now you're putting them in a truly proper place. By the time you're done, that room is immaculate and beautiful. Well, this is similar to the process of meditation. When we begin to meditate, we agitate the mind in a good way, like cleaning, in a way that is unavoidable. Again, there are things, there is data, there are images, all sorts of emotions, things that are within the mind that have been there in some cases for decades, and now we're encountering them for the first time. You continue the process of meditation, and in the same way that room eventually becomes clean, the mind eventually becomes controlled, and eventually there's nothing but goodness within the mind. But how do you do that? As soon as you start cleaning the room and there's a cloud of dust, do you just give up and run away, run out of the room? Oh my God, what is this? No, you do not give up, and you continue, and eventually that room is clean. The same thing with meditation. So how do you say this? A mood of irritability. Yes, all sorts of things can happen. Indeed, every emotion on the spectrum can happen, even within meditation. And again, it surprises people after meditation as well. It's only because you are beginning the process of disturbing the dust. You're disturbing the dust. So this is why you don't give up. You don't give up. People know this. This is true. Oh, even as far as therapy, you go to therapy, and I mean, like psychiatric therapy, something like this, counseling. Often, what happens if the therapist is really good is, first it seems that some negative things are dredged up. You need to face the past, and it's yucky. You don't really want to, but you have to encounter. You have to think about it, learn from it, and then you move on. You heal from it. Well, it's the same with meditation as well. That when we meditate, we're encountering things that are there within the mind that may not be pleasant, but again, you need to stir up the dust if you're going to clean the mind. So I hope that answers that question. I'm just looking. Very good. All right. I don't see any questions that I can answer very quickly, sadly. So maybe I'll just stop there. Yes, maybe I'll just stop there, actually, for now. But let me just say that, again, the questions that I did answer, I haven't even had a chance to even see all the questions, but you've asked wonderful questions. For those questions that I could not get to, again, I apologize deeply. We've been going almost 2 hours, and I want to let people get home and everything. But please join us again next week. Join us again next week, and again, there will be more opportunity to ask your questions, even ask the same questions, and maybe I will have a chance to actually see them, read them, and answer them for you. But let me just say several very quick things before we leave, and again, these announcements are very important. We have a Discord server. It's the ISDS Discord server. It's actually called the Dharma Nation Discord server, similar to the channel on YouTube. If and only if you are a sincere, humble, and honest individual and you wish to learn for legitimate reasons about Sanatana Dharma, you want to have more knowledge as far as practice, you want to have encouragement in your practice. If you want, as I was saying, answering another question, if you want sattvic association, quite literally to start making friends with individuals who are Vaishnavas, who are yogis, who are on this path, join our Discord server. And the link is there. There is a vetting process. Indeed, people don't know this. There's a vetting process for at least the first year or two. They just don't know it. But indeed, we're very careful. This is a truly safe place. I'm wary of using that term because of what it means today, unfortunately. But it's truly a very safe community in which we try to keep it very sattvic and positive and beautiful in every way. But join our Discord server, and you will have an opportunity to have truly good association with hundreds of devotees who are followers of the ISDS. The other thing is, please visit our website, dharmacentral.com. Indeed, we have a beautiful website that was created and is maintained by several of our disciples who are truly IT experts. That's putting it very lightly, actually. But visit dharmacentral.com, and you will see that we have quite a few books that are available there. I've mentioned the names of one or two of them today. Please feel free to look at our books, purchase them if you can. If you do, if you've never read any of our books, I suggest specifically Sanatana Dharma, The Eternal Natural Way. And in addition, these books are available on Amazon as well. Also, if you would like to donate, indeed, we are a 501c3 religious nonprofit, and indeed, we need donations because we have a movement whose mission is indeed to save this world, and it is a growing movement all throughout the world. It is truly the international Sanatana Dharma Society. If you can donate something, if it's $5, if it's $1 million, you can do that on dharmacentral.com. You can also become a member of the ISDS on dharmacentral.com, a monthly tithing member. And with that, again, I thank you truly sincerely for being here with us this week. Join us again next Sunday. And with that, I ask you all to please take very good care of yourselves, and namaste. Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jaya Shriman Narayana.
Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
Jaya Bhagavan Shri Krishna.
Jaya Shri Guru.
Jaya Shri Guru.
Sanatana Dharma Jayate.
Sanatana Dharma Jayate.
Dharma Rashtra Jayate.
Dharma Rashtra Jayate.
Surya Vangsha Jayate.
Surya Vangsha Jayate.
International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate.
International Sanatana Dharma Society Jayate.
Vedic Heartland Jayate.
Vedic Heartland Jayate.
May Dharma be ever victorious. Evam Bhavatu. May it be so. And so it shall be. And with that, everyone, I leave you with these very important words from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 18, verse 66. Ma shuchaha. Do not fear.